Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give everyone a few, let's call it a minute to get in, and we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. We see everybody coming in. Want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We'll give it a couple more seconds, and we'll get started. Thanks for being with us today. Okay, great. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, 2024 Healthcare Cybersecurity Benchmarking Study. For participants, today is a deep dive, and we'll be having Paul Russell, Chief Product Officer of Censinet, and Sean Lara, Chief Revenue Officer at Censinet, presenting the findings of this benchmarking study. We want to thank everybody for participating. And again, this will be a recorded session. All Q&A, if you do have any, just use the chat function inside of the Zoom panel, and we'll be addressing all of those questions at the end of today's discussion. Once again, thanks everybody for joining, and the floor is yours, Paul and Sean.
Perfect. Thanks, Saul. Just want to echo your comments and welcoming everyone to the webinar. We'll go ahead and get started, and we'll move briskly through a couple of slides just to sort of set the stage. And then Paul will take us through a deeper dive toward the end here, and we'll leave some time at the very conclusion of the webinar for questions and next steps. But Paul, would you like to go ahead and kick us off and introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Russell. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Censinet. And Sean?
Again, Sean Lara, Chief Revenue Officer here. And we just want to kick off by, obviously, Censinet is a cybersecurity firm focused on third-party risk, but we can't undertake an endeavor like this benchmarking study on our own. We have partners at KLAS, AHA, Healthcare ISAC, and the Healthcare Coordinating Council to thank for all of their efforts in sort of pulling this together. So excited to do this. I believe this is now the third iteration of this benchmarking study that we've done over the last few years. And so it probably goes without saying, but we consider the benchmarking effort incredibly important. And just to sort of make sure that everyone understands from a participation perspective, the benchmarks are live in the system today. And when we think about sort of the value of benchmarking and what's the sort of utility of it for customers as well as just folks in this cybersecurity community, I think it kind of comes down to a few things. The first is when you think about kind of why benchmarking is, as John Riggi at the AHA is keen to remind us all, and I think given the recent events around Change Healthcare, protecting patient safety and remembering that what we do in cybersecurity has a proximate impact on patient safety is always, I think, number one. I think it's easy sometimes to lose sight of that in the infrastructure of cybersecurity, but it is a very real threat. I think as well, perhaps from a more sort of practical perspective, understanding how we prioritize our investments in cybersecurity and where there are particular gaps in our security controls that we need to address, and how we ultimately use this data to drive really kind of evidence-based decisions. And so for those of you that have participated, obviously you're quite aware that there's sort of it's a three-legged stool in terms of how we've approached the benchmarking study. One is obviously organizational benchmarks specific to a given institution, followed by the NIST 1.1 and the HICCUP 2023 benchmarks. And so again, for those that maybe are not aware, though we've been screaming it from the rooftops, the benchmarks are available in the system today. So you're welcome to sort of go in there, play around with those results. As to sort of access to some of the data and reports, we will happily share this with folks after the webinar, but you'll be able to go in there, see some of the dashboards we built, the summary report, et cetera. And we'll also give you some contact information. In fact, my personal contact information, should you have any other questions coming out of the session today. So in terms of just kind of how we're going to continue to think about this study, again, this is now the third time that we've run through the effort in collaboration with the partners we mentioned at the outset. We are going to sort of leave enrollment in the study open. So if other participants, so if you have peers and colleagues who are interested in joining, they're welcome to come in, complete the benchmarking components, and then get access to the data and the findings following their completion. We obviously won't do a study every time someone new comes in, but want to just sort of make sure there's an open enrollment for the industry and continue to kind of support this effort. And then for those of you that are sort of thinking about kind of how to participate with us on a go-forward basis, a couple of things. One is obviously just for participants, we'll continue to allow enterprise assessments. We'll continue to provide gratis performance industry benchmarks, as well as trending and access to some of the study publications. If things like some of the more enhanced benefits that we've detailed on the right side of the page are interesting to you all, things like being able to kind of peer group filter and do more sort of direct targeted comparisons to your own institution, or look at things like how you might map to the NIST and HICCUP assessments or how you might map the NIST and HICCUP assessments to the new CPG goals. We can help with that as well via a benchmarking module that we're happy to talk to you about if there's interest. But from there, I promised a brisk intro since I know folks don't want to hear as much from me as much as they do from Paul. And so I'll kind of hand the reins over to him, and he'll kind of take us through the dashboarding and some of the other capabilities that you may have missed.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually take you into the product and show you how you can access the benchmarking reports, the actual benchmarks in the product, and then interact with them to pull out information. So the first step is to go to connect.censinet.com. And when you go to connect.censinet.com, you'll log in, and you'll have an option at the top called benchmarking. Now, if you've already received an email, there's a link in there. Just click on it. It'll take you right to this page. What you're seeing on this page is a couple of things going on. First of all, you have access to the executive summary report that was published a few weeks back, and the full findings report that was made available mid last week. So you can just click here and download those reports and view them. Now, there were three categories of information in the benchmarks this time around: organizational metrics, NIST CSF 1.1 assessment, and a HICCUP 2023 assessment. And so from this page, you can click out to each of the different dashboards for these and see the benchmarks. So let's just take a look at we'll start on the right here with HICCUP. So what you're seeing here on the HICCUP dashboard is the top level metric showing your HICCUP coverage, any remediations that you have in progress for your HICCUP program, and then any overdue remediations. Now, as I'm sure you've all heard, HICCUP has 10 practice areas. And so what you're seeing in this chart are in blue, your organization's coverage of HICCUP based on the assessment you've done. And then in gold, that would be the benchmarking. So against this wave. So you'll be able to see how you compare in each of these categories. You'll be able to navigate to NIST as well. And so you're going to see something very similar, except this is going to be structured according to NIST, function areas and categories. So if I scroll down here, you'll see the 5 function areas of NIST CSF 1.1. Now, since we did this benchmarking study, NIST 2.0 has come out. By the end of this month, we will have support for NIST 2.0 in the platform. And going forward, there'll be benchmarking support. As for now, you've got all the benchmarking information against NIST CSF 1.1, and you'll be able to move forward with both 1.1 and 2.0. You'll notice on the NIST dashboard page that not only do you have the function areas, but you can drill down into the individual categories underneath each of the function areas. And we often see organizations, when they're reporting out to their boards, take snapshots of these higher level charts. These lower level charts, they're good for starting to dig into the details, probably not board reporting level stuff, but when you're up here with these high level, you can start to show how you compare to your peers. So we took a look real quickly at HICCUP and NIST, let's jump over to the third area, the organizational metrics. And so what you're seeing here are things associated with spend and span of control. So for example, an IT expense to revenue ratio, you're in the 51st percentile. So in here, the little dot is your organization, and the blue is the middle 50th percentile. And so, IT expense to revenue, oh, wow, I'm kind of right in the middle of my peer organizations. And you might come over here and look at workforce members to cyber FTE ratio. Wow, I have a lot of workforce members being supported by a much smaller number of cyber FTEs. It also appears my program ownership is quite high. So I've got a much bigger span of control over cybersecurity than my peers do. Now, a common question that we've gotten in the past is, that's great, but what is my peer group? And we've added a new feature this year, and you'll see it up here around peer group filters, and you'll see this on the NIST and HICcup pages as well. When I click on show filters, there's a whole bunch of attributes here that you can use to filter down on your organization. So I might say, for example, I'm interested in areas where the gross revenue is between 2 billion and, well, you can just see it moved for 30 billion, but let's knock that down. That's a pretty big range. So let's make it 6 billion. And as soon as I click out of here, everything adjusts. And now you can see that for this peer group, things have changed quite a bit. My cyber expense to IT expense is significantly higher than my peers. I've dropped a little bit on IT expense to revenue. So when you're telling the story to your team, to your leaders, to the board, being able to hone in on, well, what is my real peer group, is now possible by leveraging our peer group filters. And again, this is another one of those instances where what we'll see is organizations capturing these screens and using them in slide decks for their board. So when they're making an argument for, we need to invest in this area, or our cyber and premium is way out of whack. And if you look at the studies that we recently did, there's evidence that investment in NIST actually can help with that. These sorts of charts can be very helpful in communicating to your board. So just to review, go to connect.censinet.com, benchmarking at the top, and you have a quick way to access all those. You can look at your HICcup, your NIST, and your organizational metrics. And in each case, you'll be able to filter down to the peer group that matters to your organization. Now, we have a late-breaking feature that's going to be coming out at the end of this month as well, that you'll have access to. You've got NIST CSF and HICcup already done, because you've filled out assessments for those. In February, the HPH CPGs, or Cybersecurity Performance Goals, came out. And those cybersecurity performance goals are likely to become codified into a set of regulations over the next year or two. If you're reading them, you're probably trying to figure out, well, how do we go figure out where we stand with those? Well, it turns out that there are mappings between NIST and HICcup and the CPGs. And so what we've done is we've created a dashboard for CPGs. And what this dashboard does is it takes it maps NIST to the CPGs, and then it shows you the CPGs in the context of the NIST assessment you did. So instead of having to do a whole new assessment, you can take the work you've already done on benchmarking, jump in here and see where you stand on each of the 10 essential goals, cybersecurity performance goals, as well as the enhanced goals. Now, we've got a live view. That's what you're looking at here. There's also a trend view, so you can come in and you can see how things have been moving over time. Now, obviously, the CPGs just came out, but if you've been doing assessments for NIST or HICcup in Censinet, then you'll be able to see the trend view as well. And of course, at the top, we've got the overall metrics: total coverage, the essential goal coverage, the enhanced goal coverage, and then any remediations that apply to the CPGs. There's a toggle switch here, so you can look at this in the context of HICcup or NIST, and this will automatically default to whatever assessment you completed last. With that, I'm just going to shift over to what next. So the next time you go to do an assessment, a NIST or a HICcup assessment, you could come in here and you say, all right, we've made some updates. We want to see how we're doing. You can come into Censinet and start a new assessment. And when you do that, we have a number of different assessment types. The top is really all about assessing third parties and applications, everything from products and services and the vendors that deliver them, to research and trial. If you have a research organization that's doing a bunch of studies, those studies probably have a lot of planning behind them. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a 500-page document for a study. What those documents typically don't have is anything about data security and data privacy. And so they'll do all this work to do a study to figure out how this population is impacted by X, Y, or Z, and they'll be moving medical records around for that. And sometimes, because they haven't looked at the risk and the people doing the study are really not thinking about data security, thinking about the study, they'll email that information around. So this is an assessment that can identify when there might be risks associated with the movement of PHI with research and give you a way to address that. Similarly, information exchange is about sharing information with other organizations, and internal products and projects are when your IT group or someone in your organization has built something. Along the bottom, these are all assessments that you can use to assess your own organization. You're familiar already with HICcup and NIST because you've done them, and we also have HIPAA, privacy, and security. If you wanted to kick off another NIST assessment, you'd come in here, choose a scope. This allows you to segment your organization into different parts and kick off an assessment. Now, we've got a jumpstart feature here. So the nice thing about this is there's a lot of questions, 108 questions in this assessment. Instead of going through and having to answer every one, you can actually pull your answers over and then review them. It'll save you a lot of time. So I'll use the jumpstart feature to copy my responses. I'll wait a few seconds, and I've got my assessment all filled out. Now, I'm going to go through this, I'm going to review it, but I don't have to go and do each one. Moreover, I can come in to the action plan and I can say, you know what? Build me an action plan. And I can draft an action plan for everything that was found in this assessment in just 2 clicks. These have detailed required actions that you can come in and edit. You can bulk manipulate this. This is the same corrective action plan capability that we have in all of our other assessments. So there's a lot of tools in here for the risk assessor to use to hone this, this particular action plan. So we've covered quite a bit here, everything from the benchmarking dashboard and how you access these through span of control, NIST, HICcup, the CPGs, how you filter down across all of those dashboards to your specific peer group, and then what you do when you want to conduct your next assessment and how you can leverage Censinet to get action plans for where to start focusing on mitigations or remediations. So with that, I will pause for questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Sean. We do have a question here in the chat. I see that FY 2025 federal budget proposes grants and incentives totaling $1.3 billion for hospitals to invest in cybersecurity. Could the benchmarking tool be used to communicate to execs how any security money received should be spent? Where, i.e., where the gaps are, which need to be filled. Sorry, Paul.
No, thank you, Saul. Absolutely. So when you come in here, you've got, especially when you look at allocation in 2025, the cybersecurity performance goals are a great place to start. So let's just look at the essential goals. The CPGs are broken into essential and enhanced coverage. You can see here basic incident planning, and this is obviously not your data. Your data is going to look different, but this organization we're looking at is weak in this area, and not just a low number, but low in comparison to their peers. So calling out areas like this and using charts like the enhanced goal coverage, the essential and the enhanced goal coverage to identify areas are a fantastic way to identify areas. This organization is using Censinet for third-party risk management, so they're doing quite well against their peers. Now, that's just one area. If you're a NIST shop and you're very much focused on NIST, you can do the same thing with the function areas and even drill down into individual areas. So for example, risk assessments for this organization, quite low as compared to their peer organization, 41% versus 74%. So you can look at these specific areas and call out differences between you and your peers and areas where frankly, the coverage levels are lower than you want. Finally, organizational metrics. This is a great area to pair these things together, right? You will find many organizations where the IT expense to revenue is quite low, or the cyber expense to revenue or cyber expense to IT is extremely low. And you're making an argument for we need to invest. You can double up that message of we need to invest in this area. Because as you can see in the CPGs, the cybersecurity performance goals, we're weak as compared to our peer group, which you can filter down to. But also, our spend is not on par with what everyone else is doing. So this is a great place to allocate those funds. All right. Hopefully that answered the question. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Paul. Any other questions from the group? Right at this moment, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, but if anybody does have questions, let's take advantage of this time to ask them. And if not, that's okay too. We could always wrap, and you guys could connect with Sean, Paul, and the team. So I think, yeah, we don't see any more questions here, gentlemen. So thank you all. I know I'll let you guys wrap and we'll call it.
All right.
Well, thanks again. For anyone who has questions, I'm happy to sort of herd cats on the Censinet side. We've got my email flashed up here. And certainly there's I know if you've been participating in the effort, been in contact with multiple members of our team. So feel free to reach out with any questions after the fact as well. And we'll make sure you get the right answer from the right person. And to the degree that an individual walkthrough of the benchmarking results relative to your specific organization is interesting, we're also happy to do that. So just let us know how we can be helpful and supportive as you guys are sort of reviewing this data and looking to apply it at your own organizations. And thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Paul. Paul, did you want to have some closing thoughts?
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Please take Sean up on his offer. We'd love to chat with you.
And thank you both for your time. And everybody, thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, we'll have all of these assets available for you, as well as additional opportunities to dig in further. Thanks, everybody, for your time. Thanks for attending today.
Thanks, everybody.